Imagine waking up one morning and discovering blood streaming down your face. Not from a wound, not from a fall, but simply emerging from your skin. That's exactly what happened to a 21-year-old man from Italy. He wasn't in a fight. He hadn't been hurt. He was simply sitting in his room preparing for final exams. Stressed, yes, but healthy. Or so he thought. He first noticed it during a late-night study session. His head felt hot, his palms clammy. He wiped his brow and was stunned to see red streaks on his hand. He ran to the mirror. His face was bleeding, his skin was bleeding, but there were no cuts. The skin was intact, smooth, unbroken, yet crimson beads formed and trickled down his cheeks like tears. Not sweat, not water, blood. Panic set in. Was this a hallucination? Was he dying? Was something inside him rupturing? The bleeding lasted only a few minutes, and then it stopped as mysteriously as it had begun. The next morning, unsure if he had imagined it, he continued studying. But it happened again. And again. And then one day, it happened in public, during a final oral exam. He stood before the panel, heart racing, palms sweaty. But this time, it wasn't sweat that pooled in his hands. It was blood. Humiliated and terrified, he rushed to the emergency room. Doctors were skeptical. They assumed he'd injured himself or was suffering from a severe skin condition. But when they examined him, they were baffled. His skin showed no wounds, no trauma. They ran blood tests looking for clotting disorders, platelet irregularities, internal bleeding. Everything came back normal. They checked his blood pressure, his stress hormones, even his liver function. Still, nothing. And then the bleeding returned, right in front of the hospital staff. It began with a faint redness around his temples and the backs of his hands. Then, slowly, as if the body was weeping from within, blood began to emerge through his pores. He wasn't sweating, he was bleeding through his skin. There was no breakage, no ulceration, just blood, oozing like sweat. The staff stood frozen. One nurse whispered that she had heard of something like this before. Something ancient. Something biblical. Sweating blood. They ran another battery of tests, consulted dermatologists, hematologists, neurologists, yet no one had answers. Eventually, the diagnosis came from an obscure page in a rare medical textbook. It was a condition so rare it had only been documented a few dozen times in human history. The name? Hematohidrosis. Hematohidrosis is a rare condition where capillary blood vessels that feed the sweat glands rupture under extreme emotional or physical stress. The result? Blood is excreted through the sweat glands, mixing with sweat and emerging as bloody droplets from the skin. For centuries, this condition was thought to be a myth. Some believed it was symbolic, a metaphor used in ancient religious texts. Even in modern medicine, it was so rare that many doctors had never seen a single real case. Until now. And this case wasn't symbolic. It was real. It was bleeding, and it was destroying his life. The episodes worsened. The more he worried about them happening, the more they happened. It became a vicious cycle. Stress triggered the bleeding. The bleeding caused more stress. Soon he couldn't leave his home without fear. What if he started bleeding during class? On a date? On the bus? What if people thought he was cursed? He started carrying towels everywhere. He wore dark clothes to hide the stains. He isolated himself, stopped going to social gatherings, avoided eye contact. His friends didn't understand. His professors grew suspicious. One even accused him of faking it. His world shrank room by room. Eventually, his doctors placed him on a treatment plan. Since the condition was thought to be triggered by extreme stress, they prescribed beta blockers to slow his heart rate and keep his blood pressure low. They also gave him anti-anxiety medications to help manage the panic that had taken over his life. And slowly, the episodes became less frequent. The bleeding stopped occurring daily, then weekly, then only during moments of intense stress. But the psychological scars remained. He had lived months fearing his own body, trapped in skin that could betray him at any moment. He had lived as a mystery, a spectacle, a case study, and in 2017, his story was published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, shocking readers and baffling experts around the world. His case became more than a medical mystery. It became a question about the power of the human mind, about how deeply stress can affect the body, about the invisible line between emotion and biology, because this wasn't a disease of the blood. It wasn't a problem with skin. It was a response to emotional trauma, so intense, so extreme, that it forced the body to bleed without injury. A reminder that mental health is physical health, that what happens in the mind can erupt through the flesh. Even today, hematohidrosis remains a medical enigma. There are no specific treatments, no standard therapies, just theories and hope. Some researchers believe it is linked to acute fear or emotional trauma, like what soldiers might feel in battle. Others think it may involve a rare breakdown of the nervous system, but no one knows for sure. There are fewer than 30 documented cases worldwide, and most of those were written off for centuries as superstition. Imagine being one of them. Imagine watching blood emerge from your skin during a panic attack. Imagine being told it's all in your head, and then realizing they're right. The young man's case ended with partial recovery. His bleeding episodes now only happen during moments of high tension. He's returned to a somewhat normal life, though he remains on medication. He still carries towels, just in case. He still avoids intense emotion, because for him, feeling too much can be dangerous. His story remains one of the most haunting ever published in modern medicine, not just because of the visual horror of it, but because of what it says about the human condition. That even when we feel helpless, our bodies react. That pain doesn't always need a wound to bleed. That sometimes stress is enough to make us cry blood.